Hello and welcome to Move the Line. I'm Ryan Noonan, joined here, as always, by my friends Connor Allen, Sharp Clark, to get close to the regular season and nearly put a bow here on our divisional preview series. We're all excited to jump in this week to talk about the AFC North. I'll start with Connor. How are we doing today, buddy?
Good on the final leg of my bachelor party tour in August, and very thankful to be done. My liver is hurting, but we're going to Vegas in a couple weeks to draft some fantasy teams as well, so I'm sure that won't help. But I'm really excited for the season, and this division is incredible. It has a ton of good teams, and the more that I dug in, the more it became more difficult for me to find a clear winner here.
You should be able to survive Vegas. I'm not going to do any golf out there this year. I nearly lost my friends to heat stroke last time we decided to go out there. Even in the first week of September, decided we wanted to navigate some of the local courses. And Connor nearly died. Also tried to play basically still drunk on like 2 hours of sleep, which is probably a suboptimal way to play desert golf. But just going to skip that this time. And
it was like 100 something, right? It was like 100 something.
It was thick, man. It was seriously.
I sat in the clubhouse for the last 8 holes, I think, because I just was like about to pass out, like ice on my neck and everything. It was wild ride.
It was not great. Joining us again, as always, Sharp Clark. How are we doing, buddy?
Good. I'm excited about this weekend because it's my home league's annual draft. We've been going 16 years, and we don't even play for money. And yet every year it's the most competitive and difficult league that I play in. 14 teams, auction draft in person. It's a blast, and I'm pretty pumped. Shout out to the PHL.
Love it. Yeah, that's just the home league nature, right? Like it doesn't even really matter. Definitely always playing for more than any cash prize. It's definitely bragging rights, especially if you have a long standing home league. So good luck. Hopefully you're using some of our internal auction pricing rankings and stuff like that. So auction is definitely the way to go to a whole different beast and whole different strategy. So good stuff. All right. Yeah, we're going to do AFC North today. We have 6 in the books. We only have 2 left. We have the AFC North here this week. We're going to do the AFC West next week. So we have a handful of Super Bowl contenders still to unpack. You can, again, if you're hanging out with us on YouTube, appreciate that. Thumbs up, subscribe, all those things, comments. Let us know who you like here in the AFC North. We appreciate all those things. Again, if you're still listening and hanging out podcast form, we're there as well. 5 stars, again, free content. All those things, little things seem small, but they go a long way in helping support the stuff that we're doing here. We're going to continue as we get into the season. We're going to be doing more shows. We're going to be here, Move the Line with the 3 of us, talking game breakdowns, sides and totals every Wednesday during the season. We have some news coming out in terms of what we're doing with the prop drop, which is Connor, myself, and we have a third this year. We will soon be announcing that information. That'll be on Fridays this season. So still once a week now. In season, we'll have 2 Move the Line episodes per week. So again, podcast form, YouTube, subscribe, and you won't miss a show. Also, great time to scoop up a betting sub. If you want to get it, you have your own auction league, your own home league this week, like Clark does. The betting sub gets you access to everything. So rankings, tools, projections, any article, basically anything you want to do in terms of like speculation on football, we have it covered. The Discord is really where you want to be in terms of betting subs, because that's where all of the bets are pushed through first into our subscriber Discord. That's coming before any article. Oftentimes, even when it gets into the site into an article form, it's often dead. We have a pretty sizable Discord crowd that is oftentimes frothing at the mouth for bets and very, very active and quick to operate. So you want to get in there so you don't miss those things. And that comes with the betting sub. It's the place to go. Some cheap ways to get it. You can find that on the site. If you go on to 4for4.com/plans, or you go into the betting sub, you can find ways to get free subscriptions, cheap subscriptions. If you have not taken advantage of BetMGM yet, you can use our promo code. There's all that information here in the show notes. You can get a betting sub essentially for $10, which is wild. I mean, I think we should be priced over $300. We're not. We're a little shy of that. So being able to get access to all the things that we do at 4for4 for $10 is kind of insane to me. We also have some other partners in the pick'em space like Vivid Picks, where you can play and deposit $5 and get a 2-month betting sub. Again, you just want to dip your toes and get a taste of what we do. That's available for $5. So again, insane deals. We've been talking about it for a while, but I know a lot of people wait until we get really close to the season and want to start to like jump in now. Like, these deals are wild, guys. Take advantage. you can check again, like I said, again, in the show notes, you can find where all of those are. So, all right. AFC North. Again, 4 very, very, very strong football teams. We'll start at the very top with the Cincinnati Bengals, who are 11-1 to win the Super Bowl. That number is on both MGM and on DraftKings, plus 550 on FanDuel and DraftKings to win the AFC. They are plus 160 on Caesars to win the division. Their win total is out to 11.5, juiced to the under. 10.5 that was out there originally is cooked, and that's why we're seeing a little bit of the juice here. But this is a football team that got really close. They were again, 2021, really surprising to see them in the Super Bowl. Everyone thought that they were a great regression candidate heading into the 2022 season, partially because the schedule was brutal and they got off to a slow start, 4-4. But in that back half of the schedule looked like they were staring down the barrel, and they absolutely rolled here. Connor, I'll let you get started here with the Bengals.
Yeah, it's just tough because the more I dug into the Bengals, it's hard to poke too many holes here. So they lost both their starting safeties from last season, replaced one with Nick Scott from the Rams, who wasn't all that good last year. But they added left tackle Orlando Brown. They added Irv Smith to kind of supplement their loss of Hayden Hurst. The O-line as a whole probably projects to be about league average. But really with this team here, when you have a guy like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, it's really tough to poke too many holes here on the offense. They're favored 6 straight games heading into their bye, and they're underdogs just, at San Francisco, at Kansas City. I would say that there's a couple of tough games, but when you're looking at a team like the Bengals caliber, it's really hard to say, oh, well, these tough games, these are definitely losses. Like they're capable of beating anyone. And so for me, it's just kind of a stay away because I think they're very properly priced. And as we'll get to in the rest of the show, I think the division is really strong. So yeah, they're capable of beating anyone, but inevitably they're going to slip up along the way. So for me, it's kind of just a stay away. Like I think that they're a strong contender, but there isn't a reason for me to be overly bullish or overly down on them this year. So I think that it's just properly priced in the market.
Clark, you did a really good job in our AFC East pod when we were talking about how we really feel like we have probably at least minimally 9 true playoff contenders here in the AFC. You can make the case that there are some teams that are in the mix and towards the tail end of that. And we're going to have some attrition. We're going to have some variance that comes in typically in the form of injuries. And it's really hard to take a stance where some of these teams could be on the wrong side of it for a reason that we can't foresee currently in the preseason. Now, I think the bull case for the 2022 Bengals was the improvement along the offensive line, and it worked until the playoffs where they had cluster injuries late in the season, especially heading into that Kansas City game. But basically poaching one of Kansas City's top offensive linemen, and Orlando Brown, I think helps. It kicks other guys to other sides. There's just even more depth to kind of solidify everything that they want to do. And I loved what they did last year where they saw significantly more cover 2. They knew that, right? Their teams are going to take away Jamar Chase over the top. They're going to take away T. Higgins over the top. How can we adjust? And they did. They were significantly quicker getting the ball out. They allowed Chase and Higgins and some of the other guys, even Hayden Hurst and Samaje Perine, 2 guys that aren't there anymore, to kind of win after the catch and do some different stuff. So I love seeing them be able to adjust on the fly. And I'm bullish on them this season. I'd love to get your thoughts on the Bengals here.
There's something about the Bengals metrically or in the way they do things that bettors don't like, at least bettors with a lot of influence that bet later in the week. If you noticed last week with the lines, they kept getting steamed against late in the week. Like they played the Patriots, and I think that got steamed to 3. They played the Bucks, that got steamed to 3. In the playoffs, they played the Bills, and the Bills steamed out to -5.5. And it seemed like everyone wanted to fade the Bengals, and yet they kept covering. I mean, they covered something like 8 straight to end the year. I don't know the exact numbers. Depends on what number you got. And so there's something about this team that it's just not impressing the people that really pay attention. And I'm one of those people. Like I watch the way that they play, and it's like they consistently pull out things that are low probability propositions, right? I mean, a lot of people say like Joe Burrow is just clutch, like he gets it done when it matters, and that is the thing that I think is an element of sports. Like I don't think the numbers capture everything, and so I'm willing to recognize that I could be wrong about the Bengals. I could be something that my approach misses. But in the past, when there's been a gap between what I'm expecting and what happens, sticking to my guns has typically been a good thing. Like I remember last year with the Jaguars, I was really optimistic on them, and they started the year really poorly. They had some really rough losses in the middle of the season, but my numbers were saying, no, this is a really good team. The results don't indicate what might happen in the future. And sure enough, consistently being bullish on the Jags paid off in the long run. So I think I'm with the bettors that are fading the Bengals. I think they're a good team. They obviously have a great quarterback. The offensive line, I would say, even is above average, Connor. I think that their offensive line is near the top of the league. Their defense is decent. Lou Anarumo is a great coordinator who somehow never gets, hired as a head coach, but they've kept that consistency on the coaching staff. They've got a good offensive line. They've got incredibly good receivers, at least for this year. So I think they're going to be a really good team, but I don't put them in the same tier as Kansas City. I don't even put them in the same tier as Buffalo. I think they're a feisty contender, but generally lacking in sort of the high-end upside that they're going to have to get lucky in order to win the Super Bowl, in my opinion.
I disagree. I like them a lot. I love the Lou Amarilla call-outs because I think he is, like you said, should probably be in consideration annually for, head coaching job. And I think his ability, we talked about this a few times this preview series. Like do a lot of work. We try to find any edge we can through charting defensive tendencies. And the Bengals are a team that are very difficult to draw any conclusions from because they are probably the best in-game adjustment defensively in the league. Right? That was a title that the Patriots and Belichick had for years. I would say that they probably still are really good at that and why they're able to sometimes punch above their weight because Belichick is really good in-game. Lou Amarilla is really good at that as well. Like their ability to just see what's happening and be able to just schematically make changes defensively based off of what they're seeing. Football Outsiders has them. They noted that they didn't score a second half touchdown or didn't allow a second half touchdown until late in October. They finished with the best second half scoring differential in the league. So it just shows, again, in-game adjustments. That can be on the offensive side too, right, where the offense also is able to kind of outscore teams once they get a sense of what's going on. I love their offseason. I thought they did a great job. I know that they lost some key safeties, and safety is losing Jesse Bates is a big loss. Von Bell as well, but they did a really good job last year drafting ahead. So they drafted Dax Hill the year before, late in the first round. They had another early second round pick. They added Cam Taylor-Britt, who played more than they were expecting last year at corner. Dax Hill slides in this year, could play nickel corner if Mike Hilton goes down. Chigo Awuzie, their best corner, basically missed the entire second half of the season last year. He's back this year. They have more depth. They added Miles Murphy as another body along the defensive front to add edge rushers. Like they just don't have any holes. They have great linebacker depth. Really, really, and again, you mentioned the offensive line is even better. So I get the magic bean stuff with Joe Burrow may be a little hard for some people, but man, I just think that we've seen it for basically 2.5 years, three seasons that he's played, that he's been a talent elevator, incredibly accurate, quick decision makers, the ability to adapt. I was really impressed with, like I said earlier at the top, the short, quick hitting passing stuff. So yeah, I'm very bullish on this team. You look and they're playing a first place schedule, but they're also those teams have to play the Bengals. And they've shown the ability to go into Buffalo in weather and win. They've shown the ability to go into Kansas City and win. That was kind of it was a really great game last year in the AFC Championship game. It was hard for it to kind of end that way on a late hit from Joe Asai. Again, another guy that he's 23, has played 2 really good seasons. There's just a lot of depth on this team. We were kind of all Zach Taylor's kind of a donkey, but he seems to have maybe matured in his role as well. I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of value in a lot of the stuff that's out there now in terms of betting them. You got the 10.5, good for you. It's tough to chase 12 wins in that market. I like them to win the division. So if you wanted to make a bet, I don't know that plus 160 is a great number, but I like them to win this division. I do think that they are the best team in this division. I know you guys feel strongly about some of the others, and we'll get to that as well. But this team is in the mix again for the Super Bowl after back-to-back AFC Championship game appearances.
To Clark's point about Burrow, the clutch factor and all those things. I don't know what it was, but one of the highlight reels of their 4th and 6th play against Kansas City resurfaced on Twitter the other day. And I just remember watching that. So it was a 4th and 6 from midfield, 15 minutes left, the start of the fourth quarter. he just throws like a double covered jump ball, like deep ball jump ball to Jamar Chase, who somehow comes down with it, like on 4th and 6. Like obviously, you know, this is like 30 yards downfield, and he throws that instead of like basically anything else, and he catches it. And obviously, they keep going. They didn't end up winning the game, but like it put them in a great position to end up winning. And it's just one of those things that like something like that doesn't seem sustainable, yet it keeps happening. And so I totally understand that. It's just not something, again, like I think they're a good team. I think that they have a well-rounded, you know, I guess overall team, and they have Burrow and they have Chase, but it's just not something that I don't want to lay -130 on 10.5. I don't want to lay bet over 11.5. But that being said, barring a Burrow injury, like I can't really see them winning less than 9 games or like 8 games in this like absolute disaster. So for me, it's like a team where I don't even want to bet the extreme downside because you're just basically betting on a Burrow injury. So for me, it's just a stay away.
Clark, how would you bet the Bengals if at all?
Well, first I want to push back on what you said, Noonan, about the defense. Like a lot of those numbers, especially sort of second half numbers, are impacted by the quarterbacks they faced last year. A lot of quarterbacks left mid-game. They played a lot of backups. I read somewhere that the number of snaps, the percentage of snaps they played on the season against backup quarterbacks was one of the highest in NFL history. You know, they opened the season against Trubisky, then they played the Cowboys with Cooper Rush. They played the Jets with Joe Flacco. In that Dolphins game, Tua got hurt mid-game. They played the Ravens with both of their backup quarterbacks in back-to-back games, and were probably set to lose a playoff game against Tyler Huntley until the Tyler Huntley fumbled on the goal line and it was returned for a touchdown. I think a lot of those defensive numbers are a little bit noisy, and I think that's one of the reasons why people anticipate some regression. And then on offense, like the clutch thing, Joe Burrow hasn't been clutch in late games in the playoffs. Like he's made specific plays in specific moments, but on a play-to-play basis, he's not been that good. So I think a lot of that is just sort of, you know, we have a small sample size to work with, and our bias becomes built around those things that we remember in those high leverage moments. So I expect both of those things to regress. The way I play it is just, if you like another team in the division, I think you could bet that other team to win the division. If you like other teams to win the AFC or the Super Bowl, like the Bills or the Chiefs or, you know, even the Chargers or someone, I think the Bengals taking so much of that market share, I think is incorrect. So I think that provides some value to some potential other competitors. The Bengals win total was one I bet earlier, but I think it's been steamed down because people agree with me, and Burrow, you know, has that calf injury lingering. So I think the value's kind of gone from that. I would lean towards the other markets.
Yeah, the out of unique 3 in terms of what we're looking at schedule wise is tough, right? Buffalo, Kansas City, San Francisco. That's a tough stretch without a doubt. But again, like they kind of didn't lean into that last year too. So yeah, I mean, I think you make really good points. You know, they got games against PJ Walker, Cooper Rush, Mitch Trubisky. That helps for sure. I like what they did to add to the depth in some of the spots last year where maybe they had question marks. They missed time for both Trey Hendricks and Sam Hubbard missed time last year. Well, they went out and added Miles Murphy in the first round. Now they have even more depth up front. They might have questions about Nick Scott. It wasn't really good last year. He needs to play a key role. Well, they added Jordan Battle, who, played under Nick Saban, and a lot of teams loved him coming out of the draft in the second round. So they have some question marks in terms of, or maybe some answers in terms of figuring out the question marks that they have. So yeah, I'm excited about them. I figured that I'd like them more than Clark for sure. That's typically been, the MO. Didn't want to come out here and dunk on him. Very much enjoyed the Bengals Bills game last year, but again, lots of fluke stuff. I think those teams are right there again. I don't think that final score or the way that game played is indicative of how those two teams are. That'd be a coin flip on a neutral field for sure. I just think the Bengals are in the mix with the Chiefs and the Bills, and I get why you guys might think that they're maybe in the next tier. But they're going to be an exciting football team to watch. All these teams are. And this one, I'm really excited to watch this season, especially the offense. Let's talk about the Ravens. The Ravens are, 18-1 everywhere for the most part to win the Super Bowl. You can catch a 20 on PointsBet if you happen to have the ability to get down there. They are 11-1 on Caesars to win the AFC. Best division price is plus 235 on DraftKings. Win total has climbed up quite a bit. There is a juiced under on the 10.5. Caesars has a 9.5. If you want to get in on the over, you got to lay minus 170. They are also minus 160 on the yes side to make the playoffs. So again, kind of a tale of two seasons. Really good start. They were kind of cruising. 8-4 before Lamar Jackson went down to an injury. So they kind of backed into the playoffs there. Someone had to take that last seed, and they did have a good game against Cincinnati. Kind of evident there was going to be some change. We weren't sure if that was going to be the quarterback or the offensive coordinator or both, because it looked like for a little bit Lamar was ready to go elsewhere, but they were able to come to the table. I think long-term, there's some questions here. Now you have to navigate roster construction with a big quarterback contract, but that's probably, that's a future conversation. It doesn't really impact what we're going to see here 2023. Clark, I'm really excited about this Todd Monken offense. I'm really excited about moving forward from the Greg Roman offense, which I thought was really stale. But I'll give you the floor here to talk about the Ravens.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know much about Todd Monken. I don't watch college football. I know that he was in the NFL before that. I know that he's not worked with a quarterback of Lamar Jackson's caliber and style. So that's exciting to kind of see that partnership work out. I'm not sure that I buy the idea that this is like the best set of weapons Lamar Jackson's ever worked with. It's possible, but like OBJ, hasn't really made an impact in a while. Like he was pretty good for the Rams at spots, but he wasn't really a consistent contributor. And that was an injury and years ago. Zay Flowers is a rookie. Like maybe he's good. He looked like he had some good agility in that preseason game, but we'll see how, that turns into route running, et cetera. And then Rashad Bateman, is still a question mark. He hasn't really proven anything, let alone whether he can stay healthy. So it's possible this is the best situation Lamar Jackson's ever been in. It's also possible that Lamar Jackson's not a great pocket passer. Maybe the reason why he's so good as a quarterback is because of that threat to run. And if the offensive scheme is going to take that away from him, I wonder how much that eats into his efficiency. These are all question marks. I don't know the answers. What I do know is that last year the Ravens were very good and underrated. Let me tell you, about 12 weeks into the season, the Ravens had lost 4 games. This was with Lamar Jackson. Those 4 games, Miami 42-38 after leading by 21 points in the fourth. They just blew a fourth quarter lead with terrible injured secondary play against Tua, who completed some big plays. Okay. Buffalo 23-20 after they were up 20-3. Another brutal comeback. They had 2nd and goal on the 1, down 3, and they threw an interception. Third one was the Giants. They were up in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes left and had the ball, and they fumbled the snap, and then Lamar Jackson kind of panicked and threw a pick. Giants had a 13-yard field to score a touchdown to win. And then the Jaguars 28-27 on a miracle fourth quarter comeback by Trevor Lawrence. They had 3rd and 21 on the game-winning drive, and Lawrence converted that. He got to 4th and 5 and then a first down and then went down to score. They still missed a field goal at expiration to win the game. Granted, it was 67 yards, but it's Justin Tucker, right? So that was it. That was their only losses against, pretty good teams in situations where they had strangleholds over every game at some point. This was a very good team. And yes, those blown leads matter, right? They did blow those leads, and that's part of who they are as a team. But to me, it's it also signals what their potential is. And so if all these people who are excited about the offense are correct, if Todd Monken and these receivers are a big step up for Lamar Jackson, this team has a very high ceiling on offense. And on defense, they're just kind of always good every year. They have some question marks and some holes, and we'll see how it plays out. Like you said, they blew those leads, right? So there's something not working right. Which might limit how good they can be in the long run. But I think that they're going to be a competitive team, and I think they're coming off an underrated year where people aren't giving them credit for who they were before the Lamar injury.
I think it's fair to question the receivers in a little bit in terms of who are these guys? Where is Odell at this point in his career? We haven't really seen Rashad Bateman stay healthy. Zay Flowers is a rookie. But what we're talking about and what we're going up against is Devin Duvernay and James Proche and Chris Moore, over the last handful of years, a lot of Patrick Ricard, way more Patrick Ricard than you should ever have in terms of snaps. And it was just very predictable in terms of these jumbo sets, running into, loaded boxes, not really using the entirety, in terms of the width of the fields. And we're going to see the good thing about Tom Monken, at least what we've seen, is he's bounced back and forth, right? He was at Oklahoma State and he came into, with Tampa Bay, spent some time in Cleveland, went back to Georgia. And we've seen him. It's not like this is a Todd Monken style offense. We've seen Todd Monken, look at what do I have talent wise and adjust. In Tampa, it was that look, we can get vertical and we have quarterbacks that like to throw vertical. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Jameis Winston. We're just going to kind of DGAF it down the field, contested catches, let those guys win at the, at the point of catch. And then last year in Georgia, it was a lot of almost Greg Roman style stuff. It was a lot of like 12. It was a lot of RPOs. It was even more so like pre-snap motion. A lot of stuff to like they ran RPOs with Stetson Bennett and let him kind of do stuff. And now he's got Lamar Jackson. Either way, regardless of what we think of receiver, I love the duo at tight end with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, Connor. I think that there's a lot of upside here. I think you probably see one of those receivers at least out of the three emerge, and not alone. I think, again, Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar is not a guy that we should be like talking about extensively, but like in comparison to what they've had historically there, this is a massive upgrade in terms of talent. It's a great offensive line. You're going to allow Lamar and J.K. Dobbins to run against soft fronts more often because you're not going to be jam-packed with everyone in the line of scrimmage. I think it's going to be an exciting offense. I'm going to poke holes in the defense, but I'm going to give you the floor first.
Yeah, they also last year, as a function of the Greg Roman offense, were running just 2 wide receivers on the field a bunch. And like you said, a lot of jumbo sets. Now you have the option and, the optionality to have Zay Flowers, Odell, and Rashad Bateman all out there, along with Mark Andrews, along with Isaiah Likely in the slot. I would push back. I would say that even if it's maybe not very clearly the best wide receivers that he's had, I think that it is, and I don't really think it's close when looking at things because, like you said, we're mentioning the guys that you said there, Noonan. Demarcus Robinson was like their number 1 wide receiver. I mean, like Nelson Aguilar would have been their number 1 wide receiver last year, and he's their wide receiver 5. Or 5th wide receiver, 6th wide receiver, pass catcher at this point. So I would push back on that a little bit. I also think that. But I don't think that this is like a guarantee to work. Like, I think that that's the other thing too, is the more that I thought about that is that people were really excited about Greg Roman when he came in because he worked with Colin Kaepernick, because he worked in that like kind of like offense that we've seen work. Now we're seeing Todd Monken, who, like you said, he doesn't have a system, but everything we've heard has been that they're going to spread the ball out a little bit more. They're going to be playing a lot more 11 personnel. They're going to have all the receivers, maybe Isaiah Likely playing, running more routes. Is that who Lamar Jackson is? Can he do that? I'm bullish. I think that he can. And I think that if he can do that, this offense is going to be probably a top 3 unit. Like, we're going to see outrageous scoring from this unit because the more you spread out the field, Lamar Jackson has more holes to run. We saw it at Louisville. He doesn't need designed runs to be a great effective runner. He can scramble and he can make people miss in the open field. And I think that adds to, the potential here for this offense. Now, does the running game get dinged a little bit? Probably. I mean, almost certainly they're not going to be quite as efficient running the ball, but
why?
I mean, they could be like Todd.
Well, yeah, I think you're going to have softer fronts. You're going to Ronnie Stanley a year back from the knee injury. Like, I mean, I think that they could be just as efficient on the ground. Georgia's offense last year was one of the best in the nation with Stetson Bennett, like a mid-round quarterback. They have Brock Bowers, who's obviously an elite tight end prospect. He's going to be like a top 5, top 10 pick next year. But then they have like Ladd McConkey at wide receiver. Like, they have a bunch of just nobodies out there who are like fine, but I mean, there's no one that noteworthy, and they were just shelling teams. Like, I mean, like 60, 70 points in the national championship game. So I don't know. I'm pretty confident that they can make it work, but that being said, I don't think it's a guarantee. Noonan, I'd love to hear your take on the defense, though, because I originally was a little bit more bullish. Now Marlon Humphrey suffered an injury. He's kind of like iffy for week 1. It was already a little bit thin there. So I'd love to get your take on the defense at this point. Real quick, we've seen market improvement on Lamar Jackson from a passer in terms of like intermediate, like 10 to 19 yards down the field. He's improved massively. Last year, while he was on the field, he was second in passing DVOA from 10 to 19 yards. He's made small incremental improvements every single year. So yeah, do I think that there are still some limitations? Yeah, but like, he's also just a significantly better athlete than almost everyone else playing the position, and that's still going to be advantageous for him as well. Real quick, before you hop into defense, real quick, I heard this on the Athletic Pod, and I thought it rang home really well. On in-breaking routes, which is apparently what they're going to be doing a lot of, he has the same EPA per play as Patrick Mahomes. On 11 personnel last year, he had the same EPA per play also as Patrick Mahomes. So again, reasons to be bullish on them transitioning maybe out of like their jumbo fronts and run first offense compared to this. Yeah. I have questions about Odell and I have questions about Bateman, but like Zay Flowers is a rookie, but where Zay Flowers is going to operate is where Lamar wins up and down the seam. It's where Mark Andrews is going to run and where Isaiah Likely plays. So while those two kind of figure their stuff out on the outside, you could throw Nelson Aguilar in the mix there as well. Where I think they're going to be able to hit the ground running is where some of like the best talent is, in my opinion, in terms of this offense. Defensively, I have massive concerns. I like that they signed Jadeveon Clowney. They added a little bit of pass rush. It was interesting to see that they really kind of let that go this offseason. They were kind of banking on some of the younger guys stepping up because Calais Campbell was getting up there, but had a pretty good year. Justin Houston, who was their best pass rusher, Jason Pierre-Paul, again, limited snaps, but gets to the quarterback. Chuck Clark at safety, Marcus Peters. Those are all guys that are gone from last year's defense. Now, I have massive concerns at corner. You mentioned already we have some injuries with what's going on there with Marlon Humphrey. Rock Ya-Sin is okay, but he never is healthy. He plays 11, 13 games a season. Everyone behind him is really young, super inexperienced. And we've seen this with the Ravens in the Harbaugh era. There's some bottom 5 in the league defensive seasons. And it's all come because the secondary kind of collapses. So not a good start that Humphrey is already dealing with some stuff. They also, again, they signed Clowney, but Clowney was kind of a disappointment last year. They need David Ajobo and Adolphe Owa to kind of step in and be those guys. That puts a lot of pressure on them to be those guys. They also were near the bottom in pressure rate last year, 25.4%, ranked 24th in the league. They were 6th in adjusted sack rate. That doesn't happen over and over again. So kudos to Mike McDonald for some really well-timed blitzes. But you're telling me that you have to generate pressure and you got home a lot more often than you would expect based off of your pressure rate. So that pressure to sack rate is massively unsustainable. And if you don't have guys in the back end that can hold it down, that becomes a big time problem. Kyle Hamilton had a really nice second half of the season. When they moved him into the box and let him play nickel, when they put him back at safety, it was kind of a disaster. They need him to play safety this year with Chuck Clark gone. So that makes me a little bit nervous. They might even need his services to play nickel again. There's a lot of, it feels kind of like a house of cards that could really collapse in a bad way. I think this team early, or maybe even later, and maybe before books adjust, it could be a massive over team because I really am bullish on the offense. And I think the defense is going to be susceptible to a lot of things. Now, Roquan Smith was awesome when he came in last year. He also allowed Patrick Queen to play his role better. Patrick Queen is just a guy that can fly sideline to sideline, can cover your tight ends, as a guy that you can blitz off the ends. That helped a lot. You didn't have to play him in the traditional linebacker role. So Roquan is great. Maybe a guy that's a rarity in terms of he's in the team picture of overall best linebackers in the league. He's great. But is that enough? Do we really want to lean on, inside middle linebacker to anchor the defense? I think they're going to have trouble getting pressure. And I think they're going to have a hard time holding up in the back end. So I think this is a below average defense that could be really, really bad. And for them to be average to above average, they need a lot of things to go well, especially health. And we're not off to a good start.
Yeah, I remember last offseason, the football nerds were super excited about the secondary, all the different positions they could play and how they were going to do it. I think I remember Mina Kimes talking about how exciting the secondary is going to be. And then it just kind of fell flat on its face, injuries and guys not being as good as they hoped they were or good at. They had a hard time figuring out what everybody's role was going to be. And so some of that might have been growing pains, but some of that might be signal, especially with Marlon Humphrey starting the season out and then losing Jason Peters, etc. I got some concerns as well.
Connor, how are we betting on the Ravens?
I think originally when we talked, I was they could win the division, and I still feel that way, but I also feel that way about the next two teams. And so, and now that we bring up more concerns about the defense, because I think everything you said is completely valid too. If we look at the corners, so behind Marlon Humphrey, we're looking at, maybe Ronald Darby or Damarian Williams. There's just a lot of question marks here.
Not a lot of reps there, man.
Yeah, Brandon Stevens and Arthur Millette were 90th out of 118 and 107th out of 118 in Pro Football Focus's cornerback grades. Just not great. It's really thin in the back. And so, like you said, it's probably just an over team to start. If you believe in their offense, which I do, I think it's going to become, matchup dependent, obviously, as well. So I kind of we'll see. I don't know. That's kind of but I don't think the offense is guaranteed to work either. I'm excited and I think could be awesome. It could be sick, but it could also just be, what if Lamar can't do it? It's very possible.
Yeah, over team is kind of how I'm in on this team early. I think we could see some pretty high point totals. Even the first week they play in Houston, that could be an interesting one. I wish that number was a little bit lower. It's kind of sitting on a key number. I'd love to see maybe some positive. Maybe Clark can get down. I know he's flirting with Houston. maybe Clark can get down. We can manipulate that Baltimore team total to be an overplay. If Clark ends up deciding to pull the trigger on Houston, I'm waiting for him to kind of do that for me. So, but yeah, no interest in any of the other future numbers.
What's the total in that game right now? Is Houston, Baltimore 44? Oh, that could be hot. You never know. That could be hot. I mean, Baltimore could put up 30 themselves.
It involves CJ Stroud, so I'd rather isolate Baltimore if
he looked better in preseason week 2. He had like a drive that he looked competent.
Yeah, for sure. It just early in the season, against Harbaugh and having the ability to like game plan for that for a couple extra weeks, that makes me have a little bit of pause. But hey, Clark is interested, and I don't hate it. I mean, we I think said some nice things about the Texans last week.
My number is actually like the Ravens with Stroud at quarterback.
Okay, that's right.
Was it too much uncertainty for me for a week 1 game on both sides? So it's going to be a wait and observe. But my number is for what it's worth, like the Ravens.
Okay, yeah, it was a Davis Mills play. That's right. I don't want to box.
Yeah, I do like Mills. That changes it a little bit.
Yeah,
and they haven't announced Stroud yet. Like I'm on record saying that I think they should start Mills, and we'll see if the Texans listen to me or not.
They keep rolling out Stroud for every preseason start, but Clark's over
they're
here.
Trying to give him that experience. It's important, but they should still start Mills week 1.
It's true. Be waiting for that one. As soon as that news comes through, you got to download the Fantasy Life app. You get that information first there. And Clark will have access to that right away, and then he'll make a quick move on Davis Mills led Texans. So, all right, interesting teams continue. We will move on to the Cleveland Browns. I'm really excited to get your guys' thoughts here. Browns 35. Basically everywhere to win the Super Bowl. The AFC price is 20 on Caesars. Division 4-1, best number there on FanDuel. We have a 9.5 win total, which is slightly juiced to the over. And you're getting plus money to back them to make the playoffs. They are plus 115 on DraftKings. The no side, best number there is minus 120 on FanDuel. This one's interesting, guys. I mean, it comes down to, I think there's a lot of things here, but it's basically a Deshaun Watson conversation. It was bad from a wins-loss standpoint. He was 3-3, clearly outplayed by Jacoby Brissett, who was holding down the fort while Watson served his suspension. And it's like, what do we do with that 6-game sample? And that really shapes your feeling on the Browns. His first meaningful snap since 2020. Meaningful is not really how I would describe how he played, but when you compare it to the 2020 stuff, and again, Clark has talked about this, I think he's going to maybe poke some holes on some long-term Watson stuff. Massive dips in basically anything that was meaningful. Adjusted completion percentage, big time throw rate, turnover where he plays, time to throw, which has always kind of been long, was even higher. Pressure to sack rates, basically anything took a massive dip. It depends on what you think of the NFL passer rating. It was half of what he had in 2020. It was not great. Now again, there was a bad weather game in there. There's some other stuff. If you want to be pro Watson, that's probably how you kind of shape that. But Connor, I'll kick it to you. Let you get started with the Browns.
Yeah, this is tough. I mean, initially I wanted to buy the dip on Watson because contrary to Clark, I do think that he was a good player at one point in his career, led the league in yards per attempt in 2020. Now, obviously he had Will Fuller, he had DeAndre Hopkins, but now at this point, he has Amari Cooper, he has Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones is a solid stretch outside as well, on top of a significantly better offensive line than he's ever played with in his entire career. And I think that allows him a little bit more flexibility in terms of doing what he does, which is kind of, maybe he's a little bit of a slow processor, I would say, but I think that he is able to make plays downfield if he's able to get time. And I think that this Cleveland line will be able to do that for him. And the running game is elite, absolutely elite with Nick Chubb and the run blocking offensive line. So I think that's kind of the bull outlook there. But the negative is that, and something that I'm trying to actually probably change pretty quickly here is that if it's not happening early in the season, I think it's time to jump ship pretty quick, because we got 6 games last year. We got a full off season this year. We have basically not everything you could ask for around him, but pretty close in terms of above average supporting cast and a good offensive line and a relatively good system. I mean, if he's still not looking good, I don't know. I think it's time to jump ship here pretty quick. And the reports out of training camp, whatever, it was a couple days ago, that he hadn't completed more than 2 passes in a row on any 11-11 work. Not great. So it definitely makes me a little bit more concerned about the upside of this team. Now, that being said, they had a couple of good defensive players. They added Dalvin Tomlinson to improve their run D, which was a major hole last year. They had Juan Thornhill at safety, plus another edge rusher. And I'm going to butcher it, but it's 2 O's in a row. So, we're looking at their front here. Their front four all rank in the top 17 of Pro Football Focus's ranks at edge and interior defensive line out of like 100 plus qualifiers. Like, their front is really strong. They have some good players in the secondary. Like, the team and the roster as a whole, I think, is one of the strongest in the division. But obviously, if Deshaun Watson isn't who he was, or even isn't like 90% of who he was in Houston, like, there's no shot that the Browns hit their ceiling, because we haven't really seen Deshaun Watson be able to manage a game, and kind of take a step back and just not screw things up. And if he can do that, then maybe they could still hit their ceiling or come close. But I don't know. I have some concerns.
I think part of the point that you've made, Clark, in the past is, I think, completely valid. Like, where Amari Cooper, where Elijah Moore win, it's really early in the snap. They win, they get off the line quick, they get separation. And that does not line up with the skill sets of Deshaun Watson. So, and that kind of is what I think we're getting from some of those camp reports. Maybe not specifically that piece, but like the inaccurate performances, the infrequency of completions, all those things. We need to see a maturation in terms of Deshaun Watson, the processor. And maybe that's like him leaning on athleticism and saying, like, look, I can hold the ball long enough and let Will Fuller run deep down the field. And I even have the option to tuck it and run, or I'm just going to throw it, deep one to Fuller and he's going to win. Well, now that's Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's not super sticky. And again, like, I want to give him credit. He was more than that type of guy. But when you look at, his basically time to throw rate is always like right around 3 seconds. It's significantly longer than most league average in terms of like how often the quarterbacks throw the ball. So yeah, the offensive line is great. Yeah, the running game is great. Nick Chubb is a stud. But like, if they're going to reach their ceiling, and again, if he is that guy that we saw in Houston, that's why we're talking about a ceiling. That's why we're talking about them being in the mix to win this division, because the defense is going to be exciting. But I want to give it to Clark and let him get started on Deshaun Watson here in the Browns.
Look, if you are a believer in Deshaun Watson, then you should be overweight Browns futures right now at current prices, because they have arguably the best trenches set up in the NFL when you look at offensive and defensive line, which is crucially important. They have a schedule that is outside the division pretty easy. Like, the divisions they match up against are fairly doable. Their unique three are the Bears, the Broncos, and the Jets, whereas, the Bengals and the Ravens have much tougher sets of three in those divisions. Things are set up for them to do well if they can put it all together. But I do not believe in Deshaun Watson, so I'm staying away. The thing about Watson is he has, like, the numbers are the numbers, right? But even before anything happened off the field, like, I remember watching him and just being like, he's not inspiring his teammates. He doesn't seem engaged. Like, when bad things happen, he doesn't really seem to care. He just kind of has bad body language. And it's like, those kinds of things are like, analytics people hate, like, relying on those things because they're not quantifiable. But like, that's an element of football, right? And the counterexample I want to use, and the one I wrote about, is Jalen Hurts. Like, last year, Jalen Hurts won his team over with the way that he carried himself on and off the field. Like, he's just a guy that the team wanted to fight for. And so Deshaun Watson, even before anything off field happened, lacked those qualities. And then he had the whole off field stuff and like hasn't really done very well, publicly and handling that. Like, he keeps coming out and just kind of being like, well, the media is just like painting me as the bad guy or whatever. And I just don't see a team being inspired by their leadership. And when you combine that with the fact that I have some cultural questions about the Browns in general, like, the way Baker Mayfield kind of failed after a promising start, like, points to, I think, some problems within the structure of leadership there, especially Stefanski. And so, like, adding in Deshaun Watson is not the salve that's going to fix the problems in the locker room, right? So all of that is like non-analytical, and I'm not betting it. These aren't things that I'm like, oh, because of this, I'm going to fade the Browns. These are things that are keeping me off being optimistic, because if things don't work out, I won't be surprised. And then on the field, like you said, Watson is not the kind of player who hits timing routes with accuracy and precision. And Elijah Moore, like you said, is the kind of guy who gets open quickly, needs a quick decision maker at quarterback. It's not a coincidence that when he was with the Jets, his best games came when Joe Flacco and Mike White were at quarterback, and his worst games came when Zach Wilson was at quarterback. Because Wilson is the same way as Watson. He wants to run around and make plays, out of structure, make things happen downfield, and he can make that 60-yard pass downfield when the play breaks down. But that's not a consistent way to win in today's NFL, and that's not a way to use an effective offensive line, which is what the Browns have. So I just think it's sort of like a mess on offense until I see evidence that Watson has changed as a quarterback, or until I see evidence that they're going to use RPOs and read options and things to kind of make it easier for him to hit those layups. If one of those two things happens, I think this Browns team can be pretty good, but I'm not betting on it.
We did see a late spike in design rush rate from Watson late in the season last year. So that would be something I would want to watch early. There might be a prop opportunity for us to get in on Watson's rushing yards in that, early season games. He also scrambled more too, but that actually speaks to the negatives in terms of what we're expecting him, and how he operates within the framework of the system. So defensively, we've touched on it, and I'm with you guys. Like, it's almost good enough to sustain a average Watson, right? If we get 85, 90% of what we saw in Houston, the defense is just really, really solid. Myles Garrett is like the dude, but he's kind of been flying solo for the most part, especially up front, since he's been there. But now, it's just significantly better. Connor mentioned Zadarius Smith, Okarala, the kid from the Texans, really good. And it's Jim Schwartz coming in, replacing Joe Wood. And Schwartz is the opposite of Lou Amarilla, who we talked about earlier. Schwartz has his system. He runs that wide 9 front. He likes to play a lot of man on the outside. He likes to win pressure-wise with his front 4. They have the horses to do that up front, and they have great depth in the secondary and guys who can lock down and win. So they're really good where it matters in terms of, being able to run single high safety press man stuff, because the trio of Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, and Greg Newsome is maybe the best 3 corners in the league. So if they're able to stay healthy, that's a really, really, really good unit. They also had really poor turnover luck last year. They forced just 20 total turnovers. They recovered 6 of the 19 fumbles against them. That's unsustainable as well. So they should have some positive regression there. And again, all this ability to allow Myles Garrett to win and do some things differently, where he's not going to be, he's still going to get double teamed at a massively high rate, but they do have other guys on the other side that can win as well. Dalvin Tomlinson, as Connor mentioned, they needed something. They needed some mass interior wise to eat up something to stop the run, because you could just run all over them no matter down or distance, early, late. So Dalvin Tomlinson helps a lot. He's not an elite winner in terms of run stop win rate, but he helps. And they had massive turnover at linebacker last year. They used 7-8 guys at times. It was an impossible, books never posted any linebackers from the Browns to bet, because they never knew who was going to play, because there was massive injuries and they were just rotating guys. Grant Delpit's going to play a lot of box safety role, and he adds to almost the depth of the linebacker position. So Juan Thornhill comes over from Kansas City, play more of a free safety role. It's a really good defense if they can stay healthy. So this is why they're an interesting team at plus money to make the playoffs. Like Clark said, if you are bullish on Watson maybe taking a step forward. So Connor, how are we betting on the Browns?
Yeah, that's probably, I think that this is a team you could play the high end outcomes, maybe even in the AFC, because if they do hit that, if Watson is who he is, they very much can compete. Now that being said, there's a lot of ifs that go along with that. Their defensive metrics last year were pretty bad, to be honest. It's 29th in pressure rate, 30th in rushing EPA per play. We're not only on paper, their team is really good, but that doesn't always happen. It's one of those things where we're oh, this guy's good, this guy's good, this guy's good. It doesn't always mean that there's a unit they're going to be good, and they have a pretty wide step that they have to take forward. Now that being said, on paper, it's pretty easy to project them to be a top 10 unit, in my opinion. So things can change very quickly on defense too. We've noticed, obviously it's one of the least sticky stats year to year. So I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, personally, I would just kind of shoot for the high end outcomes for the Browns here, and I think that their defense and running game can keep them in play for. All of these teams, I think, are pretty high floor teams. They're looking at 7-8 wins here, even if things are not going all that well for a team like the Browns.
Clark, I know you're not pro Browns. Are you looking to actively fade them, or is it just kind of a wait and see based off of what we see from Watson early?
Yeah, hands off. Let's see how it goes. Too good on paper to fade.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, last team in the division, Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, if this is your last team in the division. The division's pretty damn good. 60-1 to win the Super Bowl on Caesars. Caesars has best prices across the board for the most part. 35 to win the AFC. They are plus 475 to win the division. There's 8.5 juiced over for their win total is a flat 9 on Caesars at minus 115. You can get plus money on them as well at plus 140 on Rivers to make the playoffs. No on the playoff side is minus 150 for Pittsburgh. Again, if you're looking to fade the 2023 Steelers, you are stepping up against one of maybe the strongest trends in pro sports. Mike Tomlin, 16 consecutive seasons of 8 or more victories. That to me has been increasingly impressive over the last couple of years, basically with like the ghost of Ben Roethlisberger. And then last year was a mix of Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. So to continue to do it was super impressive. They had a ton of injury luck. They had the fewest adjusted games lost due to injury in the league last season, really outside of TJ Watt defensively. They didn't really miss anyone. Their offensive line had like historic continuity. And then they went out and added both, Isaac Samoa, one of the best free agent guards out there, stealing him from Philadelphia. And then they added Broderick Jones from Georgia in the draft. So they said, hey, like we got a little bit lucky last year, even though everyone played, they weren't great. And now they've added some talent there as well. It's again, comes down to the quarterback, Clark. What do we expect from Kenny Pickett in year 2? There was some good, there was some bad. If you want just, wins and losses, that group really likes Kenny Pickett because it looked good down the stretch. I have some questions. I think you might as well, but talk to me about the Steelers.
Yeah, I think that's the question. And I do have questions. And it's not just Kenny Pickett, it's Matt Canada too. I think they were good on offense down the stretch last year between the 20s, in part because they had a fabulous run game. And that was in part because their offensive line was, like you said, historically healthy. I think the same 5 guys played every game. Anytime you have that kind of injury luck on the offensive line, you're going to have a good year. And then you have to follow that up with the question of like, okay, what are the odds a lineman gets hurt? Now, what are the odds that 1 of 5 linemen get hurt, right? Like the odds that they're going to be as good up front as they were last year aren't very high. The other question I have is they struggled in the red zone, and that is usually a problem of 2 things. One is play calling, right? Like the most effective red zone teams are ones that can use creativity to open up options when the field is tight and they have to win up front or they have to win on deception. Like the Chiefs do that really well. The Eagles do that really well. They did not do well. And the other reason that teams struggle in the red zone is because the quarterback isn't very good at anticipating timing and like anticipating when guys are going to be open. The windows when you're down in the red area are so small and they open for such a small amount of time that you have to be ready to pull the trigger before it even opens. And Kenny Pickett was really, really good when George Pickens was beating his man, or even if he didn't beat his man, he could put the ball in a place where George Pickens could go get it in coverage and make the catch. And it was great highlights. It's awesome, fun, whatever. But what Kenny Pickett was not good at was seeing all the routes develop and hitting them in time. And so he struggled against the zone relative to against man, because against man, it's just you and your guy trying to beat the defender. And they were good at that. Against zone, it's much more about scheme and timing. And I think both he and Matt Canada struggled last year with that. Now, I don't want to write him off because he was a rookie, and it's possible that they just had a vanilla offense because they didn't want to put too much on his plate and overwhelm him, knowing that they weren't really a Super Bowl team. So there's a window here. They kept Matt Canada, which I thought was a bit weird. But if the plan is let's take it a step further in complexity, let's make Pickett, take a step forward in year 2, then I can understand that. They wanted some continuity to build off. It's possible that's the way they go. But I'm skeptical. I think Pickett needs to prove to me that he's the kind of guy that can, stay in the pocket. He bailed a lot of pockets too early. I want him to stay in the pocket and make those reads and make those timing throws. Once he can do that, I think he has the potential to be a really complete quarterback and a quarterback that can take this offense to the next level. Without this offense going to the next level, the Steelers are going to be a very limited team. You can't win in today's NFL on defense and relying on a run game behind a good offensive line. Like that's just not a way to win sustainably. So they need to take that step, and I need to see it first.
Yeah, I mean, you laid that out perfectly, in my opinion. I mean, that's kind of the opposite of what he was billed in terms of coming in as a quarterback. And, people didn't love him. He had limitations, but he won the first round. It was like, hey, this guy's a little bit older than your average first-round quarterback. He's a really good processor or quick decision maker, limited athleticism. We saw like the complete opposite. We saw a guy who, if like first read, yeah, it was okay. Anything that needed to develop, it was not good. And that led to him tucking and running way more than anyone thought in terms of like his scramble rate. And like we were banking on like these Kenny Pickett unders and rushing. It's like what is happening? He just kept like tucking and running every week because he couldn't get off of the first read. And that actually translated to the opposite of what we saw with Lamar, who continues to improve in terms of intermittent, 10 to 19 yards in terms of, distance wise. He was second lowest in DVOA. Kenny Pickett was last season. So anything they needed to him to kind of get to the second read, second level, anything outside of like just hitting, Deontay Johnson on a slant or just kind of a D-gap ball to Pickens became a problem. That's why, a lot of good, like quick early stuff to Freiermuth. That's not necessarily leading to anything else. So I also have questions here on the defensive side again too, but Connor, I'll let you get started on the Steelers.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more bullish than you guys. One, initially, like I think that the offensive line, I counted the opposite take. So like coming into last season, they were projected to be one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And then it wound up, out of continuity and just overall they outperformed expectations. But then you add in Isaac Seumalo, who's 10th out of 77 guards last year, according to Pro Football Focus. You draft a left tackle in Broderick Jones. Like you're adding more beef to an offensive line that already had pretty good continuity, and that like you're giving it a little bit more depth. So like I think that you're not maybe last year is the floor, but I think that their range of outcomes are a lot higher this year than we were looking at, like literally the worst offensive line in the league last year. So I think that gives them more optionality offensively. And defensively here, we look at TJ Watt, who missed half last season. Obviously the splits are a little bit noisy considering they played a lot of pretty bad teams in the splits with TJ Watt, but they allowed more than 20 points once in the 10 games that he played last year. And their efficiency metrics were not necessarily great, but then they went out and they added Joey Porter Jr. They signed 2 new linebackers. They still have, TJ Watt, Minka, Patrick Peterson. Like I think that their defense is actually going to be good. And so that I think changes things. Like TJ Watt, I think it really changes things for them. Now, the final question is Kenny Pickett. I don't know if he's good. I'm not going to tell you that I think that he's awesome, but all we've seen from him so far in the preseason has been electric. I mean, 9 of 13 for 100 something yards, ripping the ball, making good decisions, just like looks different. And so again, it's not a player that I'm like, oh, this is for sure it, but early returns so far are significantly better when we compare it to guys like, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, who look like absolute piss through 2 games in the preseason. So, like, I don't think that's worth knocking him on. And if they can get anything remotely interesting out of Pickett, I think that they can be a competitive team. Now, if they can't, then it kind of lowers their ceiling significantly, I think. But if they can, like, I think they're interesting. Now, Nuno, I'm curious to hear your holds in the defense because I didn't go as thorough into each and every position, but I think they could be good. Their metrics last year were not good, but I think that they could be all right this year.
I think they could be all right. And then you mentioned like TJ Watt changes, the calculus of all of it. And they have some continuity in terms of their stars. Still have Cam Hayward. You still have Minka Fitzpatrick and you have TJ Watt. Now that helps a lot. But you're going to be rolling out like 6 new starters. I think there's upgrades at the linebacker position in comparison to so last year, Miles Jack, Devin Bush, those are really like elite athletes in terms of linebacker position. They're good at coverage. You can allow them maybe in times to travel in the slot and do some different stuff. When you look at some of like second level yard stuff and, open field rush rate stuff like those guys are out of position a lot and were great. So they added some like boring, not great athletes, but like solid, like Cole Holcomb from Washington is going to be a nice linebacker for them. Elon Roberts is going to be a good linebacker for them. My questions are in the secondary a little bit. So like Patrick Peterson we'd already like buried Patrick Peterson. He came back, had a really nice year in Minnesota, who played almost every snap in just zone. And Patrick Peterson played really well. That's not really what Pittsburgh likes to do as much. And their other top corner, Levi Wallace, is almost exclusively good in man coverage, in press man, because he's kind of big, not really quick, not fast. So he needs to get his hands on you to win. And they need him to be set up that way, and they need Peterson in zone. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem because they don't really gel very well. They play very different styles. We've seen Patrick Peterson be forced at this stage in his career to play a lot of man, and it did not go very well. So and what are you going to do? Like, you're going to then tell me that you're going to get into like sub packages where you're taking your best guys off the field. That to me is a problem. So That's my biggest concern. They have some other issues in turnover at safety. I think they could be okay. I don't think this is a bad defense. I think they are minimally league average with some upside because of Watt. But again, like the defensive front has some turnover, and I just worry again about the corners and how that's going to work, because someone's going to be a mismatch for one of the teams. Like in terms of where you see Wallace has been like repeatedly, despite having like some good grades in terms of like explosive play rate, average depth of target. If he can't win at the line of scrimmage, guys get by him and he loses. He gives up like last in the league again on 10 plus yard receptions allowed. So I'm worried about that marriage between Patrick Peterson and Levi Wallace, because you need both of those guys on the field at the same time.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'm a little more bullish on the front with, TJ Watt, Larry Ogunjobi, Cam Hayward, Highsmith. I think there's like a couple of good guys. And the linebackers an upgrade,
Yeah, Benton, they drafted Benton in the draft. I think that kid's going to be good too. So yeah,
right. But yeah, the scheme wise, it definitely is really interesting. Now, that being said, I think that having a good pass rush can obviously mask coverage issues if you're able to scheme that. And, I hate to be the trends guy of Mike Tomlin always has winning seasons, but some coaches are just good coaches and they find a way to get the most out of their guys. Like, it just is what it is. Like, I don't know. I mean,
they were so lucky to win it. I mean, the down the stretch.
We have like 20 years though. We have like 20 years.
Yeah, but who cares? They don't have Ben Roethlisberger anymore. This is a completely different team. Last year, they beat the Ravens by 3 with, I don't know if it was Huntley or Brown playing quarterback. They beat the Raiders by 3 in Carr's last game. They beat the Panthers. Who knows who's playing quarterback for them? They beat the Falcons by 3 with Mariota. They beat the Colts when they were playing, I think, Sam Ehlinger.
That's
like down the stretch, they played some really easy teams. And the TJ Watt splits are like heavily skewed. They got absolutely, destroyed by the Eagles and the Bills and the Bengals. They all put up like 35, 40 points on them. So I just don't really see this as a good defense. I don't think TJ Watt is one player who can turn a defense that's allowing 40 points into a good defense. I think it was just a coincidence they played a bunch of bad teams when TJ Watt was back, and I think people read too much into that.
They get some really nice games though against Texans, Cardinals, Rams, Patriots, Titans, Raiders. I mean, some of those teams are okay. I mean, I think you guys are a little higher on the Patriots and maybe Titans than I am, but I don't know. I think that those are, at least a couple of those are pretty easy games comparatively. So I can understand that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm buying too much, sipping the Tomlin Kool-Aid after my entire lifetime of him just winning.
Yeah, I mean, so a combination of Tomlin being able to coach up a defense that we have concerns about. Again, even the concerns, I think they're still going to be fine. But Kenny Pickett is also in his second year. It's okay to assume that there's a possibility that he could take a step forward. I just think that there are questions, and like for the first time, it's been like wide receiver university basically. Like they produce and just churn out these guys that they pick late in drafts, and they have a little less depth in terms of what is going on there. Like they need Allen Robinson in the slot to be really good, or like to be serviceable. And I don't know, that should concern all of us after last year's abysmal season. So I don't know. I'm staying away in terms of anything in the future market. So wait and see, because I want to see what happens with Kenny Pickett. But again, I just don't want to run head on into the Mike Tomlin stuff and maybe some potential growth from Pickett. But yeah, I mean, it's a decent football team. So anyone want to have any bets? Clark, do you have any bets currently on the Steelers?
I will say, Attaboy JM made a comment earlier about, is this the most competitive division in the league, top to bottom? Yes, absolutely. In my opinion, I think the Steelers are the fourth best team in their division in the NFL, right? So yes, the Steelers are a good team, and I think if they were in a different division, I might be more optimistic. Caesars released a bad line on them that I took on make the playoffs, but nothing at current prices for me on the Steelers. I think they've gotten a lot of steam, and I am not joining that steam. I think that's what I'll say.
This is an egregious comment from you, by the way, that I posted from the chat earlier that I want to get Connor's takes on. Although this is the NFC. I read this quickly. That's the AFC East.
Okay.
I thought it was the AFC East at first. I'm like, okay, I'm okay with the NFC East having two good teams. I agree with that. I thought this was an anti-Dolphins take that the AFC East only has good teams. So I read that quickly during the show, and I'm like, I gotta get back to that.
Breaks my heart that I didn't get to do that show with you guys. By the way, that was gonna, I was very excited to tee up some Dolphins and Bill Belichick, burying himself this year in the grave. I'm very excited to watch that happen.
I am getting more skeptical about the Dolphins, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Honestly, I kind of am too, but it's all right.
Yeah, I'm not as bullish as I was for sure.
Little Bull said, we on that plus 475 division. I think that's Steelers he's talking about, or she. I think if you are bullish Steelers, I think the way to play it is some of those higher odds bets, because it's sort of like our blind spots as NFL analysts and fans is we don't often see how big a quarterback's leap can be between year 1 and year 2. And we're so anchored to what we've seen on the field. And so, like, while I'm not necessarily expecting it, like, the range of outcomes for Pickett is very wide, and he looked very sharp in the preseason. So if that is an indication of something that's going to come on the field later, then I think the Steelers are going to be a very competitive team.
Yeah, it's just too close to me to the Browns price.
Yeah.
I was looking at plus 135 to make the playoffs, but the AFC is so hard to make the playoffs. So, like, it's not really a good price. Like, I don't know. I mean,
No,
I think that they could very reasonably finish above the Browns, flirt with the Ravens. And I don't think anyone would bat an eye, but like second best in the division, 9 wins. I mean, you're probably getting in, but maybe not. I mean, I don't know. It's like, you're going to be close. You're going to be in on tiebreakers or, like something like that. And I don't know if that's really what I love to bet on.
The other thing about Pickett is, like, he won 2 games last year on last second plays where he just, they were low percentage plays, but he made them happen. It kind of like the Patrick Mahomes type plays where you're just like, okay, that's not going to work again. But if he has that, like, step it up in the highest moments kind of mentality, like, he could win a couple of those games that could go either way. And that goes a long way in a tough AFC. To
be clear too, I was not necessarily very impressed with him last year. I just thought he was, below average, like, and was fine. Like,
yeah,
so
he wasn't great, but he delivered in 2 moments that people remember.
Connor's big quarterback wins guy. So,
oh my God.
I agree with you guys. I think it's the best division in football, for sure. Just because I feel really strongly. I like the Bengals quite a bit. I think the Ravens offense is going to be great. Browns defense is good enough to solidify whatever happens there with Watson, and the Steelers are, I think, a team that has, like Clark said, more range of outcomes than maybe we should expect. So yeah, good football teams. Fun talking about good football teams. One more left, AFC West, which is also has at least 2 good football teams. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if anyone wants to make a case for a third good football team there, but we'll unpack that next week. So head over to Oh, go ahead.
Jerry Jeudy might have got carted off during this podcast.
Yeah, mid-show. He pulled up with a hammy. I think he might have popped some there.
Yeah. Not good. Go get those Marvin Mims shares. But want to talk about another quarterback who may be not good at processing quickly and getting the ball out?
Yeah.
Come back for next week's show and we'll talk more about some of that. So yeah. Head over to 4for4.com. You can read Clark's preview of this AFC North that we just talked about. By the time you're listening to this, you'll be able to read mine as well. Those are free content there for you at 4for4. Get in the show notes. Take advantage, guys. $10 with a deposit at BetMGM for a new account to get a betting sub for the full year. $10. It's an insane deal. Again, even if you're just playing fantasy and you want it for your draft this weekend, take advantage of the $10. Use our rankings, projections, all those things to get yourself helped out. So we'll be back next week. AFC West for Connor and Clark. I'm Ryan. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Connor forgot he's supposed to